All right, all right, all right. Throwback to 2003. 2003. I was literally graduating high school. Yeah, I think that was my senior year, 03, 04. And I wanted to play this, guys. I don't think I've seen anyone in particular talk about this particular song, at least in my brief search. I didn't come across it, but I have seen people talk about music in terms of some of the progression, especially from the 90s, 2000s era into the modern day, and how the music shifted, how it sort of changed perception in many ways. But I think this particular song is really interesting, and as you can see, the title I'm going to post here, which is essentially just posing that question: had an impact? Was this a pivotal point? It's an important psychological distinction, and we haven't really on this channel gone too deep into like male and female psychology or masculine feminine dynamics in that sense. But I think this is interesting because it shows us as human beings like this, you could call it a dance of sorts. You could call it sort of a psychological symptom. It's kind of that forbidden fruit. Like some of the language right in here, right? Poison paradise. I guarantee you guys know all the words to that song because you've probably heard it, right? Even if you just never listened to the song, it's been played on the radio so many times. If you were around back then in '03, like me, or old enough to remember, a lot of those words are burned into the back of your brain. So it's like they're kind of there when the song's playing. You kind of know what she's going to say next. But it's like one of those things, right? It's a subconscious thing. So I never even thought about it. Some of these phrases, language. So I kind of came back recently, and then I took a look at it because it just popped into my head because of this concept. We have this concept of the poison paradise, just this massive temptation here, right? From Britney. So the temptation, though, right? We can see it right here. It's like an addiction. It's like a drug, right? It's that toxicity, it's the taste on her lips, right? Of that toxic excitement, that toxic thrill. Okay, why do people drink alcohol? Why do people go out to clubs? Why do people get in relationships? Why do people, get addicted to all these things, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll. Okay, think about it, guys. This is part of that human psychology. It goes back to like wanting what you can't have, this forbidden fruit, this temptation of something, and again, I want to go into some of this stuff on a deeper level for you guys, but today I just want to touch on like this is such a deep psychological aspect of who we are, even sliding to that area of seduction, right? Whether, between men and women, right? Because on both sides there's that concept that comes to mind when we think about relationships and all that good stuff that comes with it, dating. What drew me to this was the language and the fact that it's something that we were just brought up on. It was on the radio, beat into the subconscious of our psyche. And what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? Obviously, you can see here it's just like this poison paradise, that sense of that toxicity giving you that rush and that high, but also knowing that it's not good for you. And so the way I want to drive it home was just, again, I always try to give you something actionable, and I want to relate it to something bigger than just, the male-female or the masculine-feminine dynamic, or even, dating, attraction, right? I want to actually go deeper, and what I want to look at is basically this concept of, human psychology, and it goes all the way into this understanding of like sin in the Bible and to miss the mark. But the psychological factor, I think, is, to me, massively important because it shows that there's this disconnect, particularly with certain types of people, right? I want to say it's the smallest percentage. And again, I'm not going to say just male or female right now, because I think, on both sides of the coin, it's more about what polarity do they actually align more with. And what I would say is that on a certain sense, there's only actually a small percentage, so it's not even really a polarity, but the spectrum, there's a small percentage of people, and it comes from more of a logic perspective, speaking, in alignment with your thoughts, with your actions. Nobody does it perfectly. Everybody is in this constant state where they're, they're trying to be more aligned with their actions. But I think, in particular, like there's certain types of people that can do this in a way where like they can be playful with what's going on. So it's almost like underlying, that person's a good person, but it's also like, that person is okay with having some sense of humor, for instance, about something like in this example, right? Like you could treat it as like, oh, like, this is ridiculous. How could you say you love something that's toxic? It's poison, and you call it paradise, right? So you could like look at it very like logistically and try to break it down, based on like, oh, A and B doesn't make rational sense to equal C. Or you could say like, it's a song. Like that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to describe this very indescribable feeling of this sense of like that thrill, that attraction. It's kind of like that feeling of like that goosebumps when you're on high alert, right? Another way of like being on alert is the word arousal. So, right, that's where I've always said there's this like, this thing that I think as human beings we're coming to terms with, right? And this is another video I'm going to talk about soon, is like coming to terms with humanity and human beings and sexuality and the energy of sexuality, the creative energy. It is the life force that creates all of us, creates everything around us. So it's very important that we have a better foundation. But I think we can't approach the conversation if we can't first have this understanding of human psychology that, sometimes people kind of like to play that game. There's a fine line, there's a balance. I think the whole key is if you go too far into this sense of like delusion in that way of like thinking, just the thrill alone or just the toxicity alone and that rush in that moment and that feeling is going to replace, anything beyond that particular feeling or that particular moment, because it's not going to project out into the future and replace something in terms of like stability or a solid foundation. And it's like you can't put that onto this. You can't expect that from this, right? So if you take it too far, if all you ever want is toxicity and you just keep playing this game with yourself, I think everybody learns this in one way or the other. For a lot of people, it's like quitting substance addictions or any type of addictions. Food could be an addiction, and we talk about that a lot here, and that's kind of how I want to tie it home. Is there, anything can be that poison paradise for you in your life. It's not just about relationships. We have this relationship with everything. I've always said the advertising and the agencies know that they're playing to people's lower self, because that's the instinctual reflex action that people reach for. It is that poison paradise of like short-term satisfaction. But again, if we can't balance the short-term and the long-term in terms of humanity, we're going to struggle more and more, and further into the future. We're going to be like, well, why aren't things adding up the way I want? It's because the same thing with physical training. I talk about this all the time, right? If you can't build that routine, if you can't have that consistency, if you can't do the things today, now, that you want to help have the effect to see the gains, the improvements, the changes in your body next week, next month, next year, it's not going to happen, right? So we have to take the same sense of responsibility, I think, with everything. And of course, like, I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to say you have to be perfect, or anybody even is. Like, it's part of why even in the Bible they say who is perfect, and not one single being except for right, essentially Christ, right? That's the perfect example of not living with sin. But without going too deep into the religion and the esoteric side, the religious aspects of this forbidden fruit, the origin story of the Garden of Eden, we will go more into even the word magic, right? That's tied into all of that. But that's going to take time, right? There's only so much I can give at one time. And because we're tying a lot of topics together, I want to make sure, again, we focus on kind of one thing at a time. I make it digestible enough for you. I want to pique some curiosity and some interest towards other things that you might not have seen as being related, or other things that might now pique your interest that, of course, we talk about the growth mindset. We talk about always wanting to have this curiosity for life, to learn, to experience more, to grow, okay? But again, this poison paradise, right? This underlying, seductive, toxic nature. It's how everything around you is formulated. It's how all of the modern world works. It's all about seducing your lower self, seducing you to lose control. And again, there are aspects of that make something very romantic, very passionate, very, I'm not saying you can't take this kind of same energy in a healthy way and also balance it out, like say in a healthy dynamic of a relationship, where the man retains some of those qualities in a way where the woman, she knows that she likes that aspect of him, but he knows how to kind of keep it in check, right? Keep it balanced. He's not just completely off, basically riding off into his poison paradise for good. It's like, and vice versa, right? So anyway, interesting kind of little quick breakdown. A little off topic of some of the stuff so far, but again, I got a lot of stuff that's recorded I still have yet to put out. I've got a lot more to bring you guys. I want to just be able to share in ways that I think are helpful. And again, I don't want to push anybody away or break the mold, but at the same time, it's important to be able to just have a bit more of an open mind and an open discourse and open dialogue about our humanity, those deeper aspects of our psychology, and how they tie into bigger things. So again, you may think about this in terms of a relationship, like a man and a woman, but you might think about it like, what's your relationship to food? Do you have this poison paradise, this toxic relationship? The moment it hits your lips, it's bad for you, right? You shouldn't be eating all that extra stuff, or junk food or this or that processed food, but you're like, oh, I'm addicted to it. I'm so addicted, right? So it's kind of interesting that it just relates to everything. It's how advertising works, right? It's why you see advertisements that pull at this kind of almost same sense of toxicity, right? Even like the political world pushing wokeness too far, the music scene, obviously drinking, partying, entertainment industries. I mean, you name it. If you really look close enough, it's tied into everything because, the powers that be, they understand this. They understand this nature of human psychology, and it ties back to that forbidden fruit. And I think really, especially right with women, we see this, right? She's having this dialogue with herself in this song of this experience. And I think men, for better or for worse, actually, I think a lot of you guys kind of maybe struggle with allowing yourself to even have that dialogue so that you can talk to yourself in a way or identify some of your own patterns, or think about this sense like, oh, am I drawn to this toxicity in someone else? Am I drawn to this aspect in other things or other people, or in this advertisement or in this movie or in this whatever that's now consuming me, consuming my time, consuming my focus, my attention, my energy? Humans are social creatures, so we, anything that jumps right up to those prime tiers of what links to our deepest psychology, our deepest desires, our deepest even pain and difficulties and struggles, right? And this is a great example of this like very catch-22 nature. And I think, again, it ties back into this coming of age we're experiencing on a deeper level. So I think the good side is that, we're moving into a space where humans can mature a little bit more. We can even almost start to see like the enjoyment in, this kind of like roller coaster ride. Like everybody wants to have some excitement and some joy in their life, a little bit of spice here and there. Everybody's got a different threshold, right? But especially for guys, like, I think it's important for you to remember, for a lot of men, it could be hard in your mind to have this type of dialogue of like, because men are so programmed towards righteousness and doing the right thing all the time. And then I think what happens is a lot of men that fall, they go all the way the other direction. They just go bad. They have nothing to balance that out. Just, crime, violence, not good, right? When you cross that threshold, man, it's not good. Like you gotta have that conversation with God. You gotta have that spiritual moment now where you walk through that furnace, that fire. If you can walk through that, you've been more righteous in your life. At some point or another, you will have to be challenged, right? Not everybody's obviously going off in that wrong direction where you start to, just fall into sin, we could say, or fall into these negative, dangerous behaviors, right? It's like almost like everything boils down to thou shalt not steal, right? When you think about the context of, some of these things, like talking about the commandments, and if you guys are familiar and understand more historical context going back into the laws of Mayat, these are things that, because I've traveled, met so many interesting, unique people in my life, I'm able to share insights on a lot of things, and I'm able to probably draw forth more than a lot of people, and I really feel it's a part of my role. That's why I'm sharing stuff like this. It's kind of just honestly spontaneous that I got into this YouTube world, but there's a lot, like I said, that I want to share, and I think today, honestly, this was just pretty interesting, pretty spontaneous, but I wanted to roll with it. I wanted to give you guys this sense of flavor to take home with you, of like understanding there is this aspect of the world. And I know, especially because I am a guy, I know for a lot of men, they don't like this kind of thing because it's like, oh, well, it shouldn't be that. It should be one way or the other. Like, you know, it's like you're a bad person because you like this toxicity, or you shouldn't like this toxicity. You should just like people who are slightly more boring or whatever. But I think if you can start to understand this dance, you will start to understand life on a deeper level. I certainly feel like this opened my eyes in one way or the other, and I'm using this to kind of touch on this concept, which I think, again, goes deeper. It goes into our human psychology, that forbidden fruit, wanting what you can't have. Again, the grass is always greener, right? We talk about the nervous system. That's like the latest catchphrase the past couple of years. We've been, really, I think, been pushing on to the scene with alpha vitality, just this concept of this, fresh energy, this energy that you're pulling from within yourself, that godly fire, right? L and phi, right? So if you really break down etymologically, and I've made some posts etymologically breaking down the beginning, in the beginning, right? And the idea is to bring it full circle. So don't worry, I have that working and going for you guys. I will have that up and going soon as far as the other channel, which will kind of tie it together. And then, of course, the Wellness Network, if you guys want to check that out, check out my channel. Just more focused on the fitness and the wellness in particular, less kind of tangential. And I think, again, just you're going to have access to other content, other, more fitness focused stuff there. But like I said, it's almost impossible, especially at this point. For instance, anytime I talk about one thing, in my mind, I'm already relating it to so many other things. So when I speak about it, I'm going to at least connect it to one or two other dots, right? And that's what I'm trying to do here for you. I'm trying to help you guys get this concept. We know that there's going to be highs and lows. And similar, we know that there's people who are, they're more liberal, and then we know there's people who are more conservative. The conservatives tend to maybe, they want to conserve this very traditional focus. Liberals, it's like they always, anything new, anything fun, anything exciting, stimulating, artistic, creative, entertaining, right? So we see this psychologically in our day-to-day world. We know that there's this polarity right here in front of us that's being used, blue and red, hot, cold, polarity on the magnet positive, polarity on the magnet negative. I've always said that's why they have the red and blue lights on the cop cars, because it's that extreme polarity. It's meant to shock you. It's meant to put you into almost like a trance-like state, right? Anyway, you guys think about that. Honestly, let me know what your thoughts are. Here you go, 2003, Britney. So did Britney Spears, did she contribute to the use of the word toxic in the modern culture? Did she also screw up all our heads because subconsciously of what she's really talking about here? We know this is built into music. All right, guys, so let me know what you think. Drop a like, subscribe, and share a comment, and we'll see you soon. All right.